this is Dan Farisi, Editor-in-Chief with Commercial Integrator, and welcome to AV Plus, the podcast for the commercial AV integration market. Today we have a fascinating discussion with Ron Bertie and Dan Maloney from Matrox. Topic of conversation is the convergence of the commercial and broadcast markets, as well as the trend toward open standards, and in particular, the ascendance of IPMX. Thank you so much for joining us and enjoy the conversation. As always, please like and subscribe to our YouTube page, and please subscribe to the AV Plus podcast on Apple and on Spotify. So happy to be joined this morning by Ron Bertie, Business Development Manager for Matrox Video, and Dan Maloney, Technical Marketing Manager for Matrox Video, for a conversation about a lot of different topics centered primarily on the commercial AV industry, broadcast, the various challenges and developments that we're seeing across categories. So thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you taking time to be on the podcast.
Yeah, our pleasure.
Glad to be here, Dan.
So let's start with the first question, which is challenges. What challenges are being faced right now by the commercial AV industry as well as by the broadcast industry? Are they similar? Are they entirely different?
Well, I'll start by saying that broadcast industry is a little bit, has had challenges pre-COVID and post-COVID. We all had challenges pre-COVID, but or post-COVID, excuse me, but pre-COVID, broadcast was really having a difficulty with their revenue models. Ad dollars it's a revenue crunch really that broadcasters were feeling because the big streaming companies were coming in and grabbing a lot of their ad dollars. OTT sites were delivering content. And so, years ago, broadcast wanted to embark on a way to remodel their business and their operations to be more streamlined. Post-COVID, their challenges multiplied because one of the main revenue models, most interesting parts of their business was the live event business, primarily sports, but any live event. That's where broadcast still was king. And of course, COVID kind of put a kibosh on a lot of that. Where there's no live audience, there's a lot of times no sports, and there's no sports, again, revenue and ad dollars kind of dry up. So that's, and then Pro AV side, they have a different set of, of challenges, but there is an overlap.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the live event space is kind of covered by both sides, right? You get some Pro AV doing it, of course, broadcast is doing it as well. And if there's no audience, well, there's no show. So that's a part of the business that's really been affected, certainly with COVID. But outside of that, for many Pro AV installations, security in the last year or two has ramped up to a major component of feature set that's being driven by the market as a whole. And you can think about it from different market segments themselves. So whether it's medical or military or government, but right into the enterprise space, it's a key element going forward, and it's really bubbled to the surface. And I think it's something that the Pro AV side has really been challenged with and is addressing as we move forward. It's really a key element. So I would say that's the two top ones for me, at least the current challenges that we're facing.
So as you both mentioned, there is some crossover, there is some intersection between these worlds, the commercial AV world and the broadcast world. When I was formerly with Sound and Communications, a lot of times I thought of myself as a journalist who covered commercial AV. I kind of thought broadcast is not really part of my beat, not really part of what my readers are involved with. But it seems like things are kind of changing now. Why do you think commercial AV and broadcast technology is converging? What do you think what forces are bringing these areas together?
Well, broadcast technology traditionally tended to evolve in a distinct ecosystem. You had manufacturers and standards bodies, putting together a suite of technologies really focused on broadcast requirements. On the completely opposite spectrum, you have the consumer electronics space, which also did require good interoperability and standards to be able to have televisions, meet up with set-top boxes, computers and GPUs, drive monitors, and just networking in general. Consumer electronics really drove a lot of that innovation. However, Pro AV was kind of a mix of both of these worlds. It borrowed heavily from both of those, but it also relied on some proprietary technology to bring these things together.
Yeah, I think both broadcast and Pro AV have turned to IP as the infrastructure to, I think that's what's driving the collision, that we're both moving towards AV over IP, and we've been doing it in sort of different ways. I mean, like Dan said, broadcasters are trying to, decrease costs. They're in a very competitive environment. The landscape is changing. So decreasing OpEx really makes a lot of sense for them. And then moving from, baseband, SDI, and so on, kind of makes sense to drive that down, drive the OpEx down. And at the same time, they've got to compete with these new elements like streaming services and that sort of thing. On the other hand, I think it's true that Pro AV, kind of draws from that, but also from the consumer electronics side. And on that side, you see the network has become basically everything's just one wire. It doesn't matter. You have a router in your house and everything's connected to that. Your phones, your PCs, your tablets, and all of that is all driven from that single service, if you will. So Pro AV, I think, is adopting and fostering from the consumer electronics side for the IP-based technology, and then of course enterprise as well, and driving their AV over IP from that. But at the same time, it's really, at this point, it's primed to sort of pull from the broadcast side some of the things that are driving standards in broadcast, because obviously broadcast, very singular workflow, or very, I guess, common workflow across many applications, has driven those standards. And I think that Pro AV is really primed to start pulling those standards to make less of a Wild West approach to AV over IP and more of a standards-based approach.
Absolutely. And I think that the standards-based approach to AV over IP is no doubt the direction in which we're moving. And I think absolutely pretty much everything in commercial AV is becoming connected to the network at this point. So I can see IP not only becoming pervasive in our community, but also being a driving force in bringing broadcast and commercial AV together. Can we just burrow a little bit deeper into the IP point? I'd like to get Dan's perspective on this as well as yours, Ron. What challenges does IP solve? What problems does it solve? Why is IP the future of the converged industry?
Well, like many other industries, IP is revolutionizing how work is being accomplished. Productivity levels and new capabilities are flourishing, all the time, or popping up as manufacturers and software developers start to harness the potential of IP. It's a universal transport technology. So it's a foundation that links many different operational components. So just by switching up the piece of software you're using, you can deliver all sorts of new services, some disruptive levels of automation, improved productivity and reduction of errors. You can pursue things in broadcast. You pursue remote production opportunities. You can leverage highly skilled workers and equipment from a location that's remote to where the event is happening. You can harness cloud-based production tools that allow you to spin up and spin down, processing capabilities as you need them, not just have them on site at all times. So we can't overstate how powerful the universality of IP is. I mean, any device can communicate with any other just by running this correct software, and that's where interoperability is important. If you have various devices, and standards are what's going to make that glue so important, so worthwhile, so powerful in the AV over IP space.
Yeah, I can't really add to that. I mean, frankly, that's what the IP side of things is, what makes things so easy, because of that little history that we've had with it. I mean, well, it's been around for a while, but the amount of growth that we've seen in it, whatever it might be, whether, starting with the LAN and now with the internet and everything that we're getting from it, it's a very short amount of time, and it's all due to the fact that it's based on standards. It's really evolved over time, and all the components that have been built into it really enable that. So it's something that's just it's a magnet to both industries to use that as the core architecture for getting what they need to get done.
And you've both now mentioned standards, and there's no doubt that the zeitgeist in our industry community right now is toward open standards, is toward interoperability, the whole open garden approach, as opposed to a closed garden where you have to work with this particular standard or this particular technology and you're essentially locked in. So I'd like you to burrow even further into kind of the benefits of open standards. As I say, there's no doubt that's where the zeitgeist is, that's where things are going. What is propelling that?
Well, I think it's the benefits, right? Obviously, the benefits to the standard, and the core benefit is that it is evolutionary and it's not generational. So when you're building on a standard, it evolves over time. And like I was saying, like with the network, right? It starts with whatever it might have been, 10 meg network, 100, then 1G, and now it's at 10 and 25 and 40 and 100. But the point is that for the most part, well, granted, 10 and 100 is not really being used, but actually 100 is still around, and 1 gig is very prevalent, and it's still part of the architecture. So it's generational. You don't, it's evolutionary. It's not generational. It's, generation is okay. Well, we've used this equipment. Now it's time to get it out and replace it with something else. No, the network has been evolutionary. It adapts, it evolves, and doesn't just get rid of the past and start over. It really is that benefit of evolution stays, so your investment can be reused and you can add to it. So one other thing is interoperability. It's a major benefit, right? Like you said, Dan, you don't want to buy something, have to use it, and then you're stuck with it. You can't use that and add to it. It just does not make a lot of sense if you don't have to. So moving towards those standards-based approaches really gives you that interoperability benefit as well. And it also allows for, developing best of breed. For instance, we work with Netgear, and Netgear, has a line of AV over IP switches. So they've tailored, yes, it's built on IT standards and networking standards, but it's built for specifically the workflow of AV over IP. It'll still, manage user data, but it's really optimized for AV over IP. So you get that best of breed kind of evolution as well. And then on top of that, I also think that, smaller companies can join the game more easily. So if the smaller companies and startups have something that's of interest and something that's valuable to the industry, it's much easier for them to join the game and bring that to market and make it useful. Whereas if they're doing it with proprietary solutions and adding to that, the pool that they play in is much smaller, and their likelihood for success is much smaller too. So it just motivates and creates opportunity when you're building on standards.
Anything to add to that, Dan?
Well, I mean, Ron said most of it. We, in broadcast, their basic point of moving to a standards-based AV over IP, was essentially they were tired of the generational concept. Oh, I'm moving from SD to HD to 4K, and I have to scrap all my equipment and then bring it back, bring back a new other set. If they can have the foundational infrastructure be evolutionary, they can just keep building on it without having to scrap how they work. And then just as new features and new ways of, new resolutions, new color spaces come up, but the foundation can still handle all of that. That's what was a big motivating factor, for them. And ultimately, there was one other point that really helped them is their skill sets required they don't have to go through a retraining of, oh, I got a new infrastructure type. I'm going to have to retrain all my people. If your infrastructure is IT based, there's a lot of IT engineers out there. Training them to handle video or Pro AV content, if the foundation is IT, becomes a much smaller learning curve, and there's a lot bigger pool of talent out there to help, drive that those installations.
So just to recap for our audience, I think some of the things we've agreed on so far is A, that the commercial AV and broadcast worlds, there is an increasing crossover and convergence. B, the power of IP is almost unlimited and it's going to suffuse our entire industry. And C, open standards are the way of, it's the zeitgeist, it's the way things are going, and we've explained some of the benefits and some of the power of an open standards-based approach. Let's see if we can bring all of those together. Do you think that there is a need for new standards to emerge as a result of commercial AV and broadcast coming together? If so, what would those be and why are they necessary?
So broadcast started this effort probably 7 or 8 years ago. The effort started and really, took off over the last 3 or 4 years, really making use of IP as the medium to transport audio, video reliably over IP. So there's been video over IP for 20 years. You've been doing web video for years, but the broadcasters had a very specific, group set of requirements to be able to use this, as a replacement to SDI potentially. And that was the goal. So can we really replace SDI with an IP-based transport protocol? And the suite of ST2110 standards was born out of this. NMOS was a second standard, which is command and control APIs that was also standardized. That came out of the broadcast industry. It was promoted and really driven by a group of like-minded, companies, manufacturers through AIMS, and then SIMPD finally ratified it. And out of this, AIMS said, well, the Pro AV space has a similar set of requirements, and that the broadcast space, however, they have unique requirements. So the same group of manufacturers got together and brought in new Pro AV, specific manufacturers and come up with IPMX, which combines the best parts of 2110 and NMOS, and in fact, fully compatible, but also brings in some Pro AV specific requirements that are unique because of the nature of the content being managed and the networks on which they're going to operate. So again, the whole idea is to make, in broadcast, interoperability was an absolute must. Cameras and the switchers and the monitors and the servers and everything, video servers, everything in between had to share a common protocol to move the videos in and out of it. The Pro AV space can certainly benefit from that as well. Moving away from proprietary AV over IP command control to a more open standards one that allows best of breed and at no compromise of quality or latency or network type. And that's where IPMX it comes in, and that's where AIMS is, the Pro AV group of AIMS is doing a great job.
Anything to add, Ron, about how IPMX supports equipment interoperability?
Yeah, I think what we could say is that it's really a well thought out, like they've been working on this for several years at this point, and it's got a lot of momentum behind it, but it's IP based, of course, so it can work. It's supposed, the idea is that it's a wide application area, and that obviously with a standard, that's exactly what you want. So it supports 100 gig. It supports standard compression schemes, and it also supports fully uncompressed quality. So it gives Pro AV the flexibility to drive multiple applications and workflows from a single standard in that sense. So you can do the low latency you might need. It gives you full uncompression, so zero lossless quality, or, visually lossless with, standard compression at 1 gig or even 2.5 gig, depending on what industry you're working within. It supports things like HTTP over IP, so that makes a lot of sense for Pro AV. And it is driving security solutions as well. It is focusing on that because it's seeing and it's reacting to the current market trends. So all of these features kind of lend to equipment interoperability, because the idea is that everybody could take advantage of that. And then on top of it, build in their own value add and their own, expertise into the solution, so that, IPMX base solution drives all of that extra refinement for, creating solutions that actually, depending on the workflow you're in, are really great for all of the solutions. So you can have different components from different manufacturers working together and exercising their specific feature set for a specific workflow. And I really think that's the benefit from the interoperability kind of things. That way you're not spending time trying to make things work together, but you're getting to take advantage of the key features that they bring to the market and the advantages they bring from one vendor versus another.
So I think we've kind of explored the benefits in a technical way, in a way that our AV Plus podcast listeners will definitely understand. Something we're also trying to focus on, of course, is kind of breaking this down to the point where if you're explaining to the CEO of a company the benefits of this in terms of practical applications, practical, what's the experience going to be? How would you describe the benefits of open standards and IPMX in kind of a technology scaled down way? If you were talking to the CEO of a company, what would she or he want to hear that would say IPMX is going to deliver what?
Yeah, there's a lot, obviously, and first, clearly we've already addressed it in a general way. So the interoperability, the standard side of things, and getting to take the best of all worlds or all manufacturers and use that for your benefit, and hopefully expectedly under a single platform of control. So in the the macro side of things, that's what you get. But then the specification, the standard itself allows you to work on 1 or 2.5 gig networks, depending on what industry you're working in, so that you can drive your content that way, or you can run, like we said, fully uncompressed at 10 and 25 gig, but you're not pigeonholed into one or the other, or any specific, that we have today, any specific manufacturer where, yeah, I've only got a 1 gig solution, or I've got a 10 gig solution, uncompressed solution, but I can't do 1 gig. So, the idea of having that all under one roof is key. But then beyond that, little things like this, the details are, okay, it can offer, it supports HDR, HFR, 4K, 8K, and even beyond that. And this color spaces and quality that it can give you match the needs of desktop or video, with 444 for desktop or 422 for broadcast. It supports all of that. And it gives you that with performance that can be described as, the latency at sub-frame, whether it's, fully uncompressed or compressed solutions at 1 gig or 2.5. So it gives you all of those technical benefits. It gives you error resiliency. So you get 3 different formats of error resiliency, where there's a spec for having completely duplicate network paths and flipping from one to the other in case one fails without any loss of content or errors. It gives you a level of forward error correction too, coding that's built in, so that you can manage lost packets and so on, or missing data. And then of course it supports like the standard network protocols like QoS, etc. It allows for key timing protocols like precision timing protocol, but it's not required. So you get the best of both worlds there as well. And then you have a full, the entire discovery management routing is all built on NMOS, which is a standard and open available API, so that even if you want to build your own control network, you can. But if you're using whatever manufacturer's control application, they use it for multiple vendors if they're all following that standard. So it's a really tremendous detailed spec that supports all of that, and then specific Pro AV solutions or requirements like HTTP, AES 128 encryption, 256 encryption for AV, the AV payloads, and EDID, HTTP, HPD events, and that sort of thing as well. All of that is supported for it. So it's really, it's what allows Ames to call it the IPMX, the IP media experience, because it really is built for media, and it gives you all those technical features as well.
I would say that's a CTOs would love to hear all of those things. And in the end, the CEO, who's going to refer to the CTO, what he wants to hear is, okay, can we consolidate some costs here somehow? That's what I want to hear. Why am I running a set, AV engineers and maybe a set of IT engineers who are, running my operations? Can we consolidate them at all? And that was what really was driving the broadcast space. One set of engineers who manage, all the infrastructure in the facility. It's the same set of engineers. And then I have some software specialists, but the infrastructure that's the underlying infrastructure in the industry, both the enterprise infrastructure and operational broad or media infrastructure is common, the same. They get to benefit from the you're purchasing the same Dell or HP servers to run your software. You're buying the same Cisco switches or Intel devices from an operational and cost analysis standpoint, it really makes a lot of sense for the bottom line of a lot of these companies.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's an important thing to emphasize, because as you say, we're not only speaking in some cases to the CTO, but also the CEO. And I think you mentioned the word experience and framing it in terms of kind of the improved experience, whether it's, a technical perspective or just a financial perspective. As you say, consolidating costs, it's important to wrap all the benefits up in a way that people are going to understand it. Is there anything that I may have forgotten to ask, or anything that you would like to emphasize or underscore before we wrap up?
Well, no. I mean, we're very, Matrox is involved quite a bit now in trying to contribute to this new form, this new standard called IPMX. There's a number of companies that are both from the broadcast space and the Pro AV space that. Certainly Pro AV has a lot of interest in it, but even the broadcast space has interest in IPMX for a variety of reasons. And we're very excited to be, part of this vastly expanding and evolving industry.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Ron Birdie, Business Development Manager for Matrox Video, and Dan Maloney, Technical Marketing Manager for Matrox Video, for joining me on the AV Plus podcast today. I really appreciate you taking the time to inform our audience not only about how the commercial AV industry and the broadcast industries are coming together, but also how IPMX can be a powerful unifier and a powerful force across both. My name is Dan Farisi. I am Editor-in-Chief of Commercial Integrator. You've been listening to AV Plus, and once again, thank you so much, Ron and Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
You're welcome. Thanks.